Okay, let's get started. This is our team, it's Map, and my name is Weikang Zhang.
I'm Adam McKittrick.
I'm Garrett Gerchar.
And I'm Sage Sherman.
Firstly, let me introduce our background information. Our client's name is Jared, and he has a little bit disability of his arm, so he cannot use the fishing pole independently. And our goal is to make the fishing pole convenient for him. And this is our fishing pole. And because Jared like Denver football team, so we made a picture above our fishing pole. And our budget is $300, and we make sure our products will not shoot somebody. It's safe.
We had a few design changes from our initial plan. At first, we were planning on using combustion, sort of a spud cannon. We were going to ignite a small amount of hairspray to launch the fishing line. However, we deemed that wasn't quite safe, so we tried to find another alternative. We turned to CO2. We were going to fill up a small chamber with CO2 and release that to launch the fishing line. However, that was turning out to be very expensive for the pneumatic valve, so we actually came up with the final design, which is using a spring. We also were originally told that we need to mount this on his wheelchair. However, we're now mounting it on the ground since that's what they wanted instead. The casting system of our device is shown here. It's a copper pipe with a spring inside that when you pull it back, it compresses the spring, and then we can lock it to the side. We're using a solenoid to kick it out of that locking position to shoot it. That way our client can shoot it by pushing a button. We also have a dual button system where both the caretaker and our client will push the buttons at the same time. That way no one can accidentally fire it. For the reeling in mechanism, we use the battery and motor from a drill, and we wired it with a variable voltage regulator. That way we can adjust the speed to an optimal reeling in speed.
As mentioned earlier, the final design of our box does have a Broncos logo on it, so it's custom designed for Gerald because he likes the Broncos. And it's also got a telescoping fishing rod. Therefore, it's convenient to travel around, to take it into the car, and other ideals like that. Inside, we're going to have the reel and the drill motor set up, along with the solenoid and the battery components. It'll weighten down the box so it can be used for any terrain, and also it'll protect it from splashback or any kind of weather that would want to go through it. So on the inside, we're going to have a hole that leads out to the fishing line into the telescoping fishing pole, and then the reel will bring it back in. And as mentioned earlier, we have a dual button system, so Gerald is going to be able to hold two buttons, one that fires and one that releases. But the caretaker that's going to be pulling back the spring will also get two buttons, one that fires and one that releases. This will ensure safety so nothing gets pressed too fast when he's trying to load it or anything like that. So another component of having the dual button system is that when the fish is reeling in, instead of reeling too far in and breaking the pole, the caretaker can just release the switch that Gerald's holding, and it will stop and the fish will come in. We also had a timeline for our original project, which we got started on this in early March. And it was the initial design that we started coming up with. We got our ideas, our finished project where we wanted to have a spring system. And then we started purchasing parts around the 13th, mid-March. And early April, we started building our box and our housing unit to hold these components. And we started throughout the month of April to start building in and designing the reel-in process and the casting system. And at the very end of April, we began testing, like on the 17th, making sure all of our components were working just right. And we're really excited for Expo.
So we were, as mentioned earlier, dealing with a $300 budget. And we stayed relatively within that because it's pretty hard to build all this, especially with our initial design and then having to redesign after that. We did maybe make some poor purchases, but those were rectified with our overall budget. Housing was relatively inexpensive because it was we just had to build the box, but it started to get more expensive when we got into the more electrical side with 2 batteries and a solenoid to activate and fire. The motor, surprisingly, was relatively cheap because we bought a drill and used the motor from that, which is strong enough to reel in the fish, which was a really good thing, and it came with a battery, so it all worked out there. We have some miscellaneous parts, but overall it was mostly the motors and the batteries that cost most of our budget. Overall, the course of this project, we've learned a lot. We've determined that we really need to take our time when taking apart mechanical projects to figure out how they work before deciding that we're going to take them apart, because we did have a setback where we took apart the drill, but then we had to put it back together, and we didn't have we kind of lost some pieces, and that was kind of a setback. So we got to remember that we need to really think about what we're doing when we take something apart. We need to make sure everything's safe before we do it, because obviously our initial idea of combustion could have some potential safety hazards, and it's probably safer that we went with the spring design in the end. Basically, we've learned all the basic components of putting together a project, like design on paper and then put it all together into an idea versus just jumping into it. And we'd like to thank Professor Pickett-May, Thomas, and all of our TAs, and then a special thanks to Home Depot for giving us a deal on our project and helping us get a standard budget.
Hi, our team is Team SMAB, and this is our automated fishing system.
So as you can see here, the caretaker has a button, and our client will also have a button to hold them down.
When both buttons are held down, the system will shoot.
And then when both buttons are held down, it will reel in.